The first article is a look at Project Tiger, 50 years on. In this article, the writer says that in 1973, India introduced Project Tiger, which transformed tiger reserves into a statutory category in 2006. The Wildlife Protection Act, WLPA, in 1972 introduced new spaces within notified forests called national parks and wildlife sanctuaries, where forest dwellers' rights were removed and vested with the state government. Today, there are 54 tiger reserves in 18 states covering 78,135.956 sq.km. Critical tiger habitats, CTH, cover 42,913.37 sq.km, or 26% of the area under national parks and wildlife sanctuaries. However, the overall fortress conservation approach to protecting tigers displaced people who had coexisted with tigers for generations. In 2005, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh appointed a 5-member tiger task force to investigate the disappearance of tigers despite spending huge money on them. They found the approach of using guns, guards, and fences not effective in protecting tigers, and that the increasing conflict between the forest or wildlife bureaucracy and those who coexist with the tigers was a recipe for disaster. In September 2006, Parliament amended the WLPA to create the National Tiger Conservation Authority, NTCA, and a Tiger Conservation Plan. The Act only modified forest dwellers' use of the forest, mostly tribals, and planned to relocate them if required. 4 months later, the Scheduled Tribes and Other Traditional Forest Dwellers Recognition of Forest Rights Act 2006, also known as the FRA, recognized all customary and traditional forest rights on forest land, including in tiger reserves. The Gram Sabhas became the authority to protect, conserve, and manage forests, wildlife, and biodiversity within their customary and traditional boundaries. The FRA introduced a Critical Wildlife Habitat, CWH, like the CTH under WLPA, but once a CWH had been notified, it couldn't be diverted for non-forest purposes. The government planned to notify the FRA rules on January 1, 2009. But in November 2007, the NTCA gave chief wildlife wardens 13 days to submit a proposal to define CTHs of around 1,000 sq.km each. India's tiger reserves were initially created democratically and based on scientific and objective criteria. The conservation plan was designed to ensure the interests of people living in tiger-bearing forests or tiger reserves. The basis for the CTH is evidence of irreversible damage to wildlife caused by human activities. The Indian government has a responsibility to determine whether forest dwellers and tigers can reasonably coexist, and if not, to modify their rights and relocate them if necessary. The buffer area outside the CTH promotes human-animal coexistence while recognizing the livelihood, developmental, social, and cultural rights of local people. However, all of India's tiger reserves have been notified without meeting these requirements, with the government not obtaining informed consent from forest-dwelling, scheduled tribe communities and other traditional communities. The Wildlife Conservation Act, WLPA, allows voluntary relocation on mutually agreed terms and conditions, satisfying requirements in the law. Once the FRA recognizes people's rights under it, the state acquires those rights according to the right to fair compensation and transparency in land acquisition, rehabilitation and resettlement, LARR, Act 2013. The law requires the government to compensate relocated people by paying them twice the market value of the land, the value of assets attached to the land, a subsistence allowance for a year, and a one-time financial assistance for relocation. As of 2018, there were 2,808 villages in CTHs, with 57,386 families in these CTHs, of which 42,398 remained inside tiger reserves. Tiger reserves experience the most resistance to the recognition of forest rights. In March 2017, the National Tiger Conservation Authority, NTCA, refused to recognize rights under FRA in the CTHs due to the absence of guidelines for notifying of tigers and tigers. The next article is Growth Sans Demand. Government spending seems to be propping up growth. In this article, the writer says that the first advance estimates of national income for the current fiscal year present a picture of an economy on steroids of government spending. While the NSO has made bold to project real GDP growth marginally quickening to a 7.3% pace from 2020-2023 as 7.2%, scrutiny of sectoral output figures that together form the gross value added and the demand data reflected in expenditure numbers posit an economy still searching for durable drivers of consumption-led growth. While overall GVA growth is seen slowing to 6.9% from the preceding FIS, CAL 7%, the agriculture, livestock, forestry and fishing sector, the bedrock of the rural economy, one of the largest providers of work and the second largest generator of economic value outside the services economy, will see output expanding by 1.8%, the slowest in 8 years and less than half of 2022-23's 4% pace. And even this pace of growth may be optimistic given the estimated shortfall in Kharif output and lag in Rabi sowing, particularly in paddy and pulses. Equally, the second largest component of the services economy, the omnibus trade, hotels, transport, communication and broadcasting sector, also a large provider of jobs, is estimated to witness more than a halving in the pace of growth, to 6.3% from 14% last fiscal. Here too, the estimates reflect the trend evident in the NSO's November 30th release of second quarter GDP estimates and underscore the underlying loss of momentum in the post-pandemic rebound in services. On the demand side, private final consumption expenditure, the largest component of GDP with a share that till 2 decades ago exceeded 60%, is projected to log its slowest non-pandemic IC year expansion in more than 20 years. At 4.4%, private consumption spending growth is estimated to have been at its lowest ebb since the pandemic and accompanying lockdowns caused spending to contract by more than 5% in 2021 and just over half of 2022-23's 7.5% pace. With the rural economy struggling under the impact of the monsoon vagaries and the resultant weakness in farm output, demand for producers of a range of goods from soaps and detergents to packaged foods and two-wheelers is yet to regain any kind of vigor in the hinterland. Gross fixed capital formation, which includes government capital spending, remains the main bright spot and driver of momentum. The NSO pegs GFCF growing 10.3% to reach a record 34.9% share of GDP this fiscal. With the general election just ahead, policymakers face an unenviable choice: keep the spending spigot fully open to prop up growth at the risk of fiscal slippage, or tighten the purse strings and risk further loss of momentum. The next article is from Mint newspaper that is India's K-shaped revival is a rather resilient story. In this article, the writer says that the letter K, often used to indicate a divergence in how the rich and poor are faring, has been a topic of discussion in India's economic discourse. SBI Research, a department of the State Bank of India, has released a report that challenges the notion of a K-shaped recovery by pointing out that this label is flawed and overlooks data that points to reduced inequality in what Indians earn. The report highlights an income escalation over 7 years since 2013 to 14 among lower bracket taxpayers, with top earners seeing their share of the total reduce. The Gini coefficient of taxable income has declined from 0.472 to 0.402 during FY14-FY22, referring to a statistical formula that would yield 0 under perfect equality and 1 if a single person earned it all. However, the report does not dispel suspicions of the hard-up having faced heavy financial hardships in recent years, while the well-off prospered. The latest fiscal year taken into account by the study is 2021 to 22, which was when the economy made up for its COVID contraction and regained its pre-pandemic size of 2019 to 20. Most readings of the rich getting proportionately richer relate to more recent signs, such as a sharp profit pickup and dividend bounce back that went with a pacey recovery in 2022 to 23 and this year. The lowest tax brackets do not qualify as bottom of the pyramid, as taxpayers form what is itself the apex of a much larger base of households. The Gini coefficient's weakness as a gauge of inequality is also noted, as its bulk comparison rarely alarms anyone, as outsized rake-ins by a few people do not move its needle much. The SPI report also has other findings that exhort us to reject the K-shaped hypothesis, such as savings, consumption, and expenditure trends, and the salutary effect of public policies and welfare handouts.